The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I am the one that they call Shayn, and today for you guys, I have a fascinating conversation diving into the paranormal from a bit of a different perspective, actually a bit more of a scientific perspective for anybody that may have some trouble connecting the dots as far as believing in the paranormal. Hopefully after today's conversation, there'll be a little bit more of a real-world explanation to what could possibly be happening behind this phenomenon, and maybe you guys will start developing some type of a belief system in it. But before we get into this fascinating conversation, I have a couple of quick news and updates. First and foremost, very exciting news as far as the Open Minds Media merch store goes. I have two brand new designs that are up and running on the store. The first one I call Campfire Chillin', and it's this cool design where you got an alien smoking a joint and a Sasquatch drinking a beer, hanging out next to a campfire together, done in a very cartoony design. And then the other design that I have is this one that says Break the Mind Control, and it has the marionette hands above it with a hypnotic symbol behind it that's kind of faded into the background so that you can just barely see it. It's pretty cool. I think you guys will definitely enjoy both of the new designs, and at least, pop onto the social media or onto the Open Minds Media merch store and at least give them a peek. Let me know what you guys think about them. And if by chance you want to win one of those t-shirts for free, if you guys didn't catch it as an ad break on the last couple episodes, I am doing a t-shirt giveaway, and part of that is a 10-question survey. If you guys don't mind filling that out for me, I would greatly appreciate it. It's a bunch of stuff that I want to start working on for the show, so I want to get some of your guys' listener opinions as far as what you guys like about the show, what you guys might not like about the show, maybe some of your guys' personal favorite topics. And in turn, after we hit 50 submissions for that survey, I'm going to pick one of them with a random number generator, and that person will get any t-shirt of their choice off of the Open Minds Media merch store. And for any of you guys that end up filling out the survey and entering, I greatly appreciate you, and just know that your opinions go a very long way as far as trying to improve the show coming into the next year, of course. And for anybody that's been a long-time listener to the show and you guys enjoy our YouTube live show, Bizarre Inquiries, we just had a live show of it actually yesterday. So if anybody didn't catch that on the YouTube, you guys will be able to catch it on the audio feed coming this next following week. But if you guys want to pop into the next live show, that'll be happening on June 6th at about 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Open Minds Media YouTube channel. And if anybody has any questions, articles, or clips that they would like to submit, make sure you guys get those to me before that next date. But if not, they will definitely get passed on to the next show. And as far as the Patreon goes, just a quick update. It is still under construction, but again, we have a lot of new fascinating things that'll be coming down the pipeline. Actually, first of which I might be able to mention on the show, I will be doing a Patreon exclusive show. It's something I've been talking about for a while, but I'm finally actually kicking into gear. So expect to see that coming up soon, and of course I will probably drop a few episodes of that onto the main feed so you guys can check it out. But just one last thing before we get into the show: if anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their experiences or encounters, or contacting me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com. Or you guys can also call or text the Open Minds Media hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys didn't catch that number, it is available down in the show notes. And if anybody is interested in catching any live shows of this show or of Bizarre Encounters, you guys can definitely check those out on the Open Minds Media YouTube channel also. And if anybody wants to get some live schedules on when that's going to be going down, you guys can follow the show on social media, and there will be a schedule dropped every single Monday, so you guys can mark your calendars. Or if you guys want to make it easier for yourselves, when you guys go and subscribe to the Open Minds Media YouTube channel, you guys can hit that little bell notification up in the corner, and then anytime we go live, you guys will get a notification for it. But every single thing that I mentioned is all available in the link tree, which is available down in that show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, paranormal researcher Joshua Amen. Sorry, that's a hard one, man. It's like I keep wanting to correct myself to Amen, but it's Amen. So please welcome to the show, Joshua Amen. Amen. See, I still did it again.
It rolls off the tongue.
It doesn't want to flow as a last name. Like, it's a normal word, but it just doesn't want to flow as a last name,
Oh, believe me, I had so many people throughout my life. I had a gym teacher that used to chant it, and he'd come walking around, and he'd be like, Amen. Amen. And I'd be like, why am I like the mascot all of a sudden? Like, why is this happening? It just draws people to want to talk about it and say it.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, you don't want to say amen because it's like you want to correct to it. Like, it doesn't sound like a last name, but anyways, man, not to spend too much time on that, but for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do exactly, why don't you let them know a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do, man?
So as a paranormal researcher, I kind of meld the two worlds of the paranormal and supernatural with science. And it's unintentional, but it's become my like niche in the field of kind of just talking about like how science works with the paranormal, how to break things down actually scientifically, talking about chemical bonding, talking about how electromagnetic radiation works, and actually explaining how equipment works. And that's branched off into a bunch of different things. I have the podcast Tales from a Ghost Hunter. I co-host Stories in the Cemeteries podcast. I wrote an article in the Paranormal Investigators Almanac. I have been kind of just all over the place. I have my own tours in Pasadena, California. So I do a paranormal scavenger hunt where I take people to a haunted location. I teach them the history. They get to learn how to use the equipment, basically be a ghost hunter for the night. And at the end of it, they get a highlight reel that goes up on YouTube, and then everything is on the website. So they can go back, look at photos. They can go back and look at the audio. They can see all the words that were generated by the app. It gives them the experience of being able to do like start to finish without having to do the hours of research, like going back through the evidence. So it's become a very broad like spectrum of stuff I ended up doing. I've been researching for months just on that one tour, trying to get all of the details, because the location I take people to is Pasadena's Colorado Street Bridge, and most of the people locally know it as Suicide Bridge. There's 106 people I have to date where I have names, information, and like dates of everything. So, and there's more to come. So there's still more research to be done.
Man, so I'm glad that you kind of look at stuff from the scientific perspective, and I definitely want to dive into some of your paranormal experiences and some of the stuff that you've dived into, but at least for me, when I dive into a lot of this bizarre type stuff, like I try to link it myself to something that has some type of like scientific or like literal base to me. So it's not like I'm just jumping like right into the woo-woo. Like I have to have like a logical explanation to like build up to that point. So I'm assuming you're kind of the same way, where it's like my whole idea of what I believe ghosts are is probably a lot different than what other people believe ghosts are, because in order for it to make sense to me, I have to link it to like real world things. So I guess before we get too crazy into this conversation, I'd love to kind of dive into your perspective on like what you think this whole ghostly realm is, before I guess I get too far into some of the theories and stuff I might want to throw at you.
So I ruin everybody's perspectives on ghosts because of the way I look at it. And
I'm happy to hear
contradictory to my contradictory to my last name, I ruin that too. So I don't believe in the whole heaven hell. I don't believe that we go somewhere after death. I believe you get to stay put. You are still here. And one of my base theories is the soul is comprised of electromagnetic radiation. So the electricity running through your nervous system, running your brain, running your body is the soul. And when it leaves your body after death, it's still present. However, you can no longer interact the way you would normally interact because you're now an energy field. Because energy can't be destroyed or created, it just has to move somewhere else. So we've lost the meat suit, and now we're just kind of free floating, and now we have to relearn how to do everything. Not to mention, we now need to find a place to call home, because most people notice spirits don't travel unless they're attached to some kind of an item. And that's where, like, stone tape theory, like having limestone or quartz or something that's acting as some kind of base. Because now this energy field that is the soul needs what you call a capacitor. So a capacitor has to have something that is conductive and something that is non-conductive. So a piece of paper with graphite, like from a pencil, can be a conductor. And this is where we start getting into haunted items and how that works. And this can be your home. It can be a car. They can even try to attach to an individual. They just need something where they can go back and recharge. So, and this kind of like rolls into everything else I theorize in the paranormal, because they don't go out during the day most times. You don't get a lot of activity during the day. My theory is that's because of UV light. So there's 3 types of UV light. There's UVA, UVB, and UVC light. UVB is what gives us sunburns. It's what we use in tanning beds. It's what we use to clean items. It's what people use for, like, they put their phone under a UV light and it's supposed to clean it and make it all pretty. This is harmful to EMF radiation, just as it is to our actual bodies. So, and it causes the effect of ionization. So when you ionize think about it as like a free floating bubble, it's the, for lack of a better word, the orb, it's floating around, it's doing its thing. We can't see it because we don't see an EMF field. And, all of a sudden, there's a UV light, and it's kind of like a sunburn. And then if the UV light is too strong, it starts pulling the batteries from this orb. So it's pulling the electrons away from the bubble, and now the bubble needs energy. It's losing all of its power. It's being drained. So they stay out of the light. And then they come out at night.
Is the idea with that theory basically would be that if they were out during the day and that energy bubble completely like dissipated, that essentially the energy would have been pulled apart at that point, and then that conscious being or soul, whatever you want to call it, like wouldn't exist anymore? Was that kind of an extension of what you were saying?
That's kind of where I'm going with it. And it has to be a certain amount. So I'm actually working with, I have, this is an ion meter, and I'm going to be working with that and an EMF pump to try to figure out at what level you have to have UV light to cause ionization. So, because a black light, UVB light, ranges at a UV index of 20. Most days outside don't get over 11 or 12. So there's a huge jump there. So I know black light is causing the ionization effect. I don't know where it starts outside when it's just kind of sunny, So like an overcast day is obviously going to be an uncomfortable feeling, but I don't think it causes ionization for the spirit. Just like outside at night, you get the running thing has always been, full moon means more activity. My friend actually did a full moon study because he investigates in Charleston, South Carolina, and he runs his own interactive ghost hunting tour. He took all the data from all the tours he's done, ran it against the moon phase, and realized it's actually the opposite. you get more activity during a new moon, which also strengthens my theory because 10 to 20% of UV light bounces off the moon. And that's what you see at night shining off the moon. So I actually came up with the equation of how that works so that we can figure out how much UV light is technically showing when you're walking around during a full moon. Again, this would probably be a minor inconvenience, or kind of like if you stay out too long, you get drained from the sun. You know, it's an inconvenience. It's a sunburn.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. But in the meantime, don't forget to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook. And don't forget to check out Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok. I'd love to hear from you guys, so feel free to leave a comment or spark up a conversation. I love getting to know you guys. And now back to the show.
Just out of curiosity too, like from at least like your viewpoint on this stuff, do you believe that these things are like conscious, or do you think it's rather just it takes the shape of the body that it previously inhabited rather out of just like a residual effect from like that form itself, but it's not actually conscious? Because this is where like the debate kind of comes in that I kind of want to get in with you, is the whole concept with like a conscious spirit versus like a not conscious spirit. Because I definitely dive into the whole stone tape theory as far as like these unintelligent hauntings, but when you start getting into the like the intelligent hauntings, like I don't think that it's a spirit, and we can get into that. I think it's something like a little bit beyond that, but
right. So, your theory actually coincides quite heavily with Barry Fitzgerald. I don't know if you know, he's from Ghost Hunters International. He was on the TV show. He was the main investigator, and I talked to him. I interviewed him on my podcast because of the fact that we share the theory about UV light being harmful to spirits. And he actually leans a little closer to what you're talking about. In my opinion, the difference between an intelligent and a residual haunting is the interaction. If something's interacting, it's intelligent. And if it's not interacting, it's what you would call a high emotional moment impressioned on time. So it's basically a stamp or an imprint on the paper that is our timeline. And it's just like, it was that such a high emotional like state or moment that it was like forced into the, you know, that timeline in that area. And as long as there's energy going through it, it's basically recharging whatever capacitor it attached to. So we're just recharging this residual like rewatch, you know, of the same clip over and over and over and over again. It doesn't interact with us because it has no free will or consciousness to do its own thing. But it was unintentionally kind of like what would you call it? It's its own little Horcrux, you know, Voldemort sliced a piece of soul off and left it there.
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
It's like it takes like the shape of that energy form, and it isn't the energy form itself, but rather like something else in the area that like kind of takes the shape of like that energy form.
Yeah. So, and it has a lot to do with like, you know, they talk about some of the early episodes of Ghost Hunters, the TAPS team. They talked about a poltergeist haunting being attached to a young girl. And not because it was an actual haunting, but because it was her outward energy being forced out into the universe. And it was only happening when she was present. So she was going through a lot. There was a lot happening in her life. Like, it just happens, you know? So if you take that same concept and you're having this high emotion, like, moment in your life, what's to say that energy isn't released and then imprinted into the space? And that's what's causing the residual haunting.
I mean, I like that theory as far as like poltergeist go. I haven't actually heard it kind of stated from that perspective, because I've always kind of I heard when it comes to poltergeist, a lot of people like to talk about demon activity, but I don't like to throw those words up in the air all the time. Like, I think that there's these other things that exist like outside of like our understanding. And this is where stuff gets a little bit more into like the woo-woo side of things. But, you know, talking about the whole energy aspect, like I definitely think that, you know, we are carbon based. So like our understanding of like what we need for sustenance is material object or is material things that we need to consume. But as far as if there's something that exists that's like a life form or something that's outside of what we understand that a life form can be based out of, like who knows what they could potentially need as sustenance. I mean, looking at like plants, for example, they're not even too far off from us, but I mean, most of their sustenance comes from, again, like the ground and then the sun itself. So, you know, if you have something that, so yeah, if you have this thing that exists like outside of our understanding and it needs this sustenance that's brought in from like an energy form, where it's where you get into these like vampiric like energy type beings. I don't think that they're like demons as like what people describe. People are just kind of using that as like a slapstick word to cover up like a plethora of different things. But you know, if you get into the whole astrophysics side of things, that things are existing outside of our time and space and outside of our reality, like it doesn't seem that far off to me that there might be the existence of these beings that basically will take their sustenance from taking energy from something else. And I mean, this kind of leads into kind of where I have like an understanding of like the paranormal and stuff, is that at least for me and a lot of like the research that I've kind of dived into, I don't think that there's like conscious like human souls that are like existing in this plane. I think that there's like definitely the idea of like stone tape theory, that there's these like residual things that are just sticking around, but they're not conscious spirits. But these things that are interacting consciously, I don't think that they're human spirits. I think that there's something that's beyond that. And the question of what what happens with like the human soul after you pass on is completely up for debate. But at least from like what I would assume from like my viewpoint is that whether you want to call it heaven or another reality, that's kind of usually more what I go to. Once you become this non-physical thing, your energy exists in another place. So I feel like you would then exist in this other reality that's like almost existing in the same plane as our reality, where it's like there'd only be like a temporary amount of time that you'd be able to like interact with this physical reality before you're just fully into that reality. And that's where that like in-between zone kind of comes into. And I'll get your thoughts on this, but I kind of have a lot of like conspiracy theories as far as like the understanding of that between zone and what you can actually do with that time in between. But
that's really interesting. And I mean, you know, I usually tell people like you don't shift into another, you know, heaven, hell. You shift into another plane of existence. And that is why like my theory, it fits so well with everything I try to explain, because if you are now electrical energy, everything is on an EM spectrum. So EM radiation, right, goes all over the place. So you start with EM radiation down at the absolute base of like radio wave, microwave. You have visible light, you have IR infrared light, you have ultraviolet light, gamma radiation is all part of the EM spectrum. So now you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, we see in the EM spectrum, but we only see visible light. We see a little bit into the UV spectrum, and we see just about this much into the IR spectrum, which is why you see red light when you hit your, you know, remote for your TV, or you see red light on a ghost hunter's, you know, camera light. So, but we don't see what it's allowing you to see in the dark. However, this is why you have animals that see more than we do, because an animal can actually see farther into the EM spectrum.
supposedly mantis shrimps can see 3 to 4 colors that we can't even see. I always like to throw that in there. It's a fun, cool fact.
Yeah, and there's types of birds, the same thing, where they have another rod and cone, you know, that we don't have, that allow them to see hundreds of colors more than we can. So there's so much to the science of it, you know, that we don't understand. I mean, there was a study actually done proving that animals can see farther into the electromagnetic spectrum than we can. So your dog seeing something is much more valid when you know that it's actually been proven. And the whole concept of like, oh, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't see it dead on. That's because you actually have longer rods and cones in the sides of your eye than you do straight on. So you are more likely to actually be able to see something that way. This is the whole concept of the predator prey, where we're able to kind of get something out of the corner of our eye. We know when somebody's watching us. Like there's so much science built into it all that it's almost hard to not understand the fact that this is all, it all makes sense. But we've let the Baggins of the world pollute the paranormal field to the point of it's a joke. People look at it and they run around. They're like, oh, they got their blinky lights. They're screaming about demons. They're having a good time. It's entertaining TV. And it's what everybody's doing now. It's the YouTubers. It's, the TV shows. It's anybody who wants to make a quick buck. And it's sad because the people that want to do the real work are the ones that are no longer on TV or never made it there. Barry is a very influential person in my upcoming of being in the paranormal field. The TAPS team was a very big influence on me becoming a paranormal investigator and doing paranormal research. But none of them are really on TV anymore. And it's because they don't want to continue to try to adhere to whatever the network's asking for. They're not trying to do the stuff that's scary. They're not trying to make it entertaining for somebody to watch. They want to show real activity. So it's, and talking to Barry was fascinating because he shares a similar theory to you where he questioned, a ghost. It's like, okay, well, you said your name is this, but this is, you're saying you're Indian, but this is an Egyptian word, and it makes no sense with what you should be coming from. And he would question until it got to a point where it didn't want to answer him anymore. So then they could go somewhere else and have the same exact effect happen. So, and it comes into the whole, I can't think of that. I think it was like Sully or some with an S. It was some kind of an experiment where they kept running into a blue alien. And they would randomly talk to this blue alien, but no matter where they were in the world, they'd find the same guy just there to talk to them again. And it's almost like it's the same, like recording almost, like you're running into the same thing. And this entity is just kind of respawned, and it's like the character in the video game that you can't get rid of, where he's always everywhere, but he only interacts so far.
Or, even on a weird other way of thinking about it, it could be some type of entity that exists as like a parasitic, like hive mind. Kind of a weird way of thinking about it, and this is kind of leading into what I was saying with some of the conspiracies that I think, as far as like the paranormal world goes, so I think a lot of like the shows and stuff are purposely showing this crazy, like, oh, this is what we're doing. They're demons. They're this, intentionally to like pull the viewpoint off of what the real aspect of the paranormal is. Because when it comes to like Sasquatch, UFOs, any of this stuff, there's always this weird government intervention when you start getting down these certain avenues. And the weird part with the paranormal is that's the one that's been dived into more than like probably any of it by the US government, but yet they just kind of leave it alone. Why is that? My idea on it is that they have an understanding of how this other plane works. And rather than like, putting their 2 cents in, they kind of just sit back and let everybody say, this is a demon, this is this. So they just make the whole entire community look kind of crazy as a whole, not understanding that, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, this whole idea about like what you could do within that temporary time on that other side before you get pulled into this other reality. And this is where I think the whole idea about like transferring consciousness kind of comes into that, there's been enough diving into like astral projection, all of this stuff that if kind of, like, again, why would the government spend that much money funding something about almost like the consciousness or soul leaving the body if they didn't think there was something to it? Like, I think that they have an understanding of how to essentially like transfer consciousness, and they know that like they're able to do all of this type of stuff within this realm, and that's the reason why they let everybody think it's just this spooky, here's a ghost, here's that realm, is because they don't want people to know like what the true potential power is of it, which is why I don't think that there's anything necessarily like conscious like we think it is, because I think that like human consciousness, like you said, it goes into like another plane, not like a heaven. Some people want to call it that for sure, but I think it's like another existing plane that's just non-physical. Like you become like this energy being, so of course you'd exist like in this energy plane. So you're like it's like another layer of reality that you're existing in that you can't like affect like the physical reality anymore. But I don't think that there's just like conscious spirits like hanging around. I think that whatever these things are that are interacting, like it's something else. It's another being that comes from these other places. Because again, it's like if we've already thrown the ideas about there being these other realities and we've already kind of had some scientific backing to it, you'd have to expect that more than likely there is some type of things existing over there, especially if you consider the fact of like Earth, even if you view it from the point that maybe we're the only life in the universe, like if there's multiple layers to the reality on Earth, then it still seems logical that there would be other levels of life within that reality, even if Earth is the only place that there's life. So I feel like, again, there's a lot more conspiracy around it, and a lot of this paranormal stuff is intentionally skewed up to push people away from like what is actually happening with this realm. And that's why these shows are promoted. And, nobody knows where these are, they think it's the network coming down and saying like, oh, we want you to do this, we want you to do this. But, who knows who could have money tied into that stuff? It may not even be the network directly that's pushing these narratives, but rather like the people that are funding the network saying like, all right, like this is what we want to see in the ghost show. And they don't even realize that they're pushing an agenda, because I don't want to make it seem like everybody on a ghost show is bad. Like, I don't think that they full well know what they're doing all the time, because even when you get wrapped up in something, like you're doing this is your full-time job, like as messed up as it is, like you get to a certain point where it's like, I feel like you personally don't feel like you have a choice. You kind of just have to do what the network says to do. Otherwise you're going to be out on your ass. And a lot of these paranormal shows kind of get stuck in that point.
It's true. And like I was saying earlier, it's the skull experiment was the little blue alien they kept seeing.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in a flash. But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. That's less than the price of a bag of chips, and it's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts or premium video versions of the show, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits and 7-day free trials available. Now let's get back into it.
But it brings into thought like some of the other experimentation that has actually happened. So, I mean, there was the Philip experiment. I don't know if you're familiar with.
Just in case the listeners aren't, just fill them in.
Yeah, so the Philip experiment was basically a bunch of parapsychologists that got together and decided, like, and these were real people. This was like a psychologist, his wife, a group of people that came from all different walks of life, and they came together and they created a person. And they said, okay, his name is Philip. He lives here. He died this year. And they inserted him into history. And they drew him out. They gave him a timeline. They gave him a full backstory. Like they gave the dude a tragic life, which kind of sucked. It's like you create a person and you still gave them crap. Like,
I'm pretty sure that I remember the story because I remember hearing the story recently. They basically said that there was like this I think it was a knight or something like that, some noble man, and he was in love with this woman.
He was knighted.
Yeah, and then there was like this affair that happened with this woman, and then rather than him admitting to his fault in the affair, he let her just be called a witch. She got sent to death. He went off after that, and he basically ended up like. I don't remember if he killed himself. I think he killed himself or something like that.
He jumped from the castle.
That's what
which
it was.
Is the only real thing in the entire story. They used a real castle site as his. This is where he lived. Everything else is made up.
But they needed that trauma component because I think that was part of what they were mentioning when I was diving into the experiment, that they had to make all of these intricate details with a lot of trauma associated with them because they needed that thought projection from that, because the negative emotions hit people harder than even like the positive emotions do. So if you wanted to get this idea of this thought form to project, like you would have to have the trauma, and you'd have to have intricate details to the point where the human mind would start assuming it was real rather than a story. So it's like it was needed.
Yeah, so and they talked about this guy for a year. They just sat around and talked about him like he was a normal person in history. Like they just had these conversations, like they were all just fanatics about Philip, and we're all getting together to talk about him like he was like Napoleon or a president or, somebody in history that we all knew about. And at some point they started doing seances, and they changed the way they were doing things. They changed the table they were using, and all of a sudden the table started moving. And then they even recorded it on live TV where the table would move and nobody would be like really touching it or doing anything. The table's moving, it's scooting across the room, it's trying to get to people. They recorded multiple times where they'd walk into the room and the table would come to them, like it wanted to talk more. So it's like they gave it They gave it a capacitor. They gave it life. They gave it all these things. And then the minute somebody mentioned something about, well, you're not actually real, magic, it just went away. It's like you burst the child's bubble, Santa Claus ain't real, and poof, gone. So it's...
So that kind of brings some more validity into the whole aspect of something rather coming in and taking the form of something. Because this is what I was saying earlier with like when people are trying to contact their grandma or like they think it's a little girl or something like that. Like, I don't think these are conscious human spirits. I think it's rather that, whether you want to call it a tulpa, but the whole tulpa thing, I kind of bring full circle in this, but I think that it's not necessarily the fact that a lot of people, I mean, it could be viewed two ways. It could either be one, the aspect of a lot of people put thought into something, so in turn, that thought energy ends up creating this thing to manifest within this reality. Or on the other side of it, if you manifest the thought of something existing, then you're giving something rather like a catalyst to exist in that, it's not that that thing ever existed. It's just that, like we're kind of saying earlier, like whatever this other is, whatever this other energy is, if you give it an opportunity to come in, it's going to take that opportunity. That's why, like, dealing with the Ouija board, for example, I mean, that's up for debate on whether or not they work, but a lot of people think they're talking to their grandma, and then all of a sudden these questions start getting really, really weird, or the responses start getting really, really weird. Anybody that's contacting the dead in the aspect of doing seances and things, like, I don't think that you're ever going to get a hold of your family member. I think that you're contacting something that is using that as delivery service and just impersonating whatever you think it is, because you gave it that opportunity to come in as long as it was going by that name.
Yeah, it's basically a miniature Philip experiment. Like, in all honesty, it's exactly what it is. And it's why, like, when I do my investigations and I take people on the paranormal scavenger hunt, I give them history, and I talk to them about, like, the bridge was built in 1912, was finished 1913. By the time they finished it in 1913, there was 3 accidents and 2 deaths. Like, I start telling them the history behind the bridge, but as we're going and they start getting stuff and they give me, oh, I got this word. Oh, I got this name. Oh, I got this. Well, keep going. Talk to that. Confirm first name, last name, get more information. And I lead them through it, so that at the end of the day, I can take what they've found and then I match it up. Who you talk to, this is his name. It's the day he died. This is the information on him. This is what happened to him. These are the words you got that correlate to all of these events. Instead of telling them, oh, this is George and he jumped and, it was the 18th of October. And so that it's not here's the information, now something take hold, or somebody kind of, jump in and play the part. I want them to find who it is we're talking to. And honestly, I kind of luck out in a way, because I got 106 plus people to deal with at some point in time. I have almost the entire calendar to play with at this location. And it's a horrible, horrible way to put it. But in terms of like what I'm taking people to do to show and prove the afterlife, it works really well. And it's those high energy moments. Someone's death date makes just as much of a difference on an investigation as, it's a full moon or it's a new moon, or like we have somebody who's psychic in the group that came along and might exude a little bit more of that like paranormal, like hotspot light. People see the lighthouse in the distance and know to come over to see us or whatever it is that it looks like on that side. But, all these things really come to play in each individual environment. And, to some extent, I believe you are right. There is like other things that just kind of hang out and they show up when needed, and take an opportunity. But
I don't even know if these things are fully conscious, or if it's just a matter of they're just like a thing that exists to absorb energy, and they may not be conscious. We just assume they're conscious because we're looking at it from a human perspective, like we wonder why they do these things. It may not be that simple. It's just a thing that does something. Like, why do parasites do things. Like, they're not conscious of what they're doing. It's just what they do, and they just do it. Like, it could be no different with these things.
And you know what? It honestly brings up the whole theory of, I always tell everybody that there is something darker at the bridge. And it's not, I don't refer to it as a demon, because in my mind, everybody's got the same concepts, right? You know, they're all like, oh, 3 scratches, Holy Trinity, they're mocking you, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you look at your hand, you got 5 fingers, 3 of them are longer than everyone else. So 3 scratches, if I scratch you, you're getting, you know, the longer fingers. I just look at that as somebody trying a little too hard and they freaked you out. But when you're looking at a location like what I'm talking about, it's a negative energy every single time. This person jumped, this person shot themselves, this person threw a child and then jumped. Like, there's so much negativity. And we talked about like poltergeist activity and how that works. If you imprint horrible, negative, violent thoughts over and over and over, at some point that's going to take some kind of a conscious form. We're creating a parasitic darkness. So now you have this free-floating energy that needs something, right? It needs energy to continue to survive. It knows absolutely nothing. It's barely got a consciousness because it's just this negative energy being imprinted over and over again and layered upon. This could very well be what everybody starts looking at as inhuman demons, you know, all of these things, because we've practically created this free-floating bottle of just negative energy. So, and it could be parasitic. It could exist to continue to exist and suck energy out of things. So when I'm at the bridge, I get answers every once in a while that something darker is present and something else is there. And they leave and they tell us to leave. So, and that's where like my blacklight theory comes into play, because then I'm like, okay, now we're on the defense. I have my blacklight. I shine that around. You get that thick feeling in the air, like you're walking into water, or there's like a heaviness, you know, or there's like when there's a fight and you're like off on the sidelines and you're kind of involved but not, and it's just like that heavy feeling. You know, you get that during that timeline, and I feel like when I have the blacklight on, that's the ionization I'm feeling. The minute I shut it off, everything dissipates and goes away because I've now pulled the batteries. Whatever is present has to go back to its hole and figure out a way to recharge.
I got a weird theory that may actually connect in with part of like your theory. So, something to think about. When people pass away, there's, again, this like energy field or this energy bubble, whatever you want to call it. And assumably there's going to be like negative energy and there's going to be this like positive energy. And assumably the positive energy is going to be very energetic. It's going to be free flowing fast. And then the negative energy is probably going to be very dense, very thick, and very like clustered together. So you talk about these locations that you associate with being like, oh, this is a dark area, it's haunted. This is a dark area, it's haunted. Oh, this field, whenever I'm here, I feel uplifted. I feel happy. I feel great. Like, this is beautiful. Like, I love this. It makes you wonder if there's an aspect to it of where does this energy go after the person passes? Maybe it's a little bit closer than what we think it is, in the aspect of if there's this cluster of negative energy in this particular area, when somebody passes, if there's this cluster of negative energy, that's all going to pull back together and create this area of just all negative energy where all the negative energy gets pulled to. And that's why you'll have all these weird different activities happening in multiple spots at the same type of location. And then on the positive side, again, you'll have these like areas that you go in this like beautiful field and you'll feel like you're like connecting with nature, your ancestors. Maybe you are in a little bit more of a sense that's where all the negative or all the positive energy goes. And this whole ether concept plays a huge aspect into the whole paranormal aspect of things, that, you know, what we're looking at is this vampiric energy. It's not necessarily like an other, like we were saying, but again, like an unconscious thing that just does as it does. So if you have all this negative energy from all this people that just keeps accumulating into this area, it's going to keep trying to suck that negative energy. And that's going to be its whole focus, is just trying to cluster and get thick with that negative energy. So maybe that kind of plays a component into like how all this stuff functions, is that it's not that each individual component stays conscious itself, but rather that it becomes part of whatever cluster is closest to it that has the same energy form as it.
Yeah, and see, this is where like I start diving in, because this could be a simple difference between positive and negative ions. It could be, a energy field being split between positive and negative ion, and there's your negative ion and there's your positive ion, and there's your different types of energy fields. Or it could be something as simple as our emotions plus compounds that it may interact with that energy field during the time of death that cause the differences in the energy field after the fact. So like this is all just new stuff that I'm going to dive into and look farther into now, because there's a new concept to really look farther into. There's obviously a chemical reaction in our bodies, when you have a negative thought or a positive thought. You have the serotonin, you have the dopamine, you have all these, chemicals that start rushing. What does that look like, when introduced to an electrical field? Does it have an effect? Is there a different outcome depending on a negative or positive, like chemical? So like, this is the fascinating part of what I do, that I love doing, because people talk about it and they're like, oh, that's just a bunch of bullshit. When I start throwing the science into it and I can actually start to show how it would technically work, that's when people start to doubt themselves. They start to doubt, how they're approaching you or approaching others and talking about this, because now there's more to it. There's something they trust being inserted into the paranormal. And that's where like this becomes such a passion for me.
Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back with that deep conversation you crave. But just a quick reminder, if you'd like to snag some gear for this show, Bizarre Encounters, or one of your favorite cryptids or topics, hop on over to the Open Minds Media merch store for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. And t-shirts now for the low price of just $15.68 plus shipping. And now let's get back into it.
See, I'm one of those people, too, that it's like you have to try to research things from all perspective and angles. So as much as I like the whimsical and the magical, it's like I have to get there from like a ground of reasoning first. So it's like I may throw out some ridiculous claims, but there's backing that has gotten me up to that point. And I mean, even kind of playing off that, too, we're talking about these like negative energy and positive energy clouds. That could also play a component into things like poltergeist activity, because, if it's the typical teenage girl that's going through the traumatic teenage years, there's all that energy that's getting thrown up. It's all this like raw negative energy. So if these clouds are existing, clouds for so to speak, are existing in this non-physical plane, that they're not stationary to like one thing, they're kind of like hovering above everything as this energy cloud. If you have this energy source that is attracting it because of this negative energy, but it's a fixed point in this physical reality, then which one's going to move? It's not going to be the one in the physical reality. It's going to be this energy bubble that's going to come over and follow over to that. So if there's this house that's just always filled with this negative energy, if there's some location close that has this bubble, all of a sudden there's all this negative energy in this area, it gets pulled over to that fixed point, and then it would start existing over this house. And that could be where like the poltergeist activity comes in, is just because it's like almost like an antenna to pull this stuff over to where there's a physical point for there to be this a more messing of negative particles, so to speak. Because even playing into your theory earlier, maybe the reason why these like vampiric energies exist is because if they aren't always trying to continuously harvest more for this cloud, then it's slowly dissipating. So they're always playing this game where it's like it has to suck in more than it's dissipating, otherwise it ceases to exist. So the reason why they go after these energy sources is because they need that constant flow, because if they don't have that, then they'll eventually just dissipate out and completely just, not exist anymore. Maybe it'll start dissipating out and those negative energy particles will connect to negative energy particles in other locations. Which could also be why you need so much focal point on like a haunted area, is because if there's not enough, then that energy just dissipates out and it expands out elsewhere.
Yeah. So, and this is why, like, I talk about the whole, capacitor. Everything has to have something to attach to. So, like, I have a haunted item. that was sent to me by a company called Real Haunted Items. And they sent it to me as like a surprise package. Hey, mention us in a video, investigate the item, blah, blah, blah. And it's some book pages. So you have ink and paper. It's microfiche film. So you have, again, this like conductive material, and it can create its own capacitor based on the materials, which then allows for something to attach to it. And then it can just kind of like hide in its little, hole. And it brought up an interesting concept of like, well, can they just kind of suck into the item and then kind of, blurp back out when they're ready to be there? And after talking to the people at Real Haunted Items, they started using UV light while investigating these items, and they would use it as almost like sun's up, sun's down, to see if it would increase the activity. And their findings were like, when they did that, it increased the activity, almost like they knew, okay, now it's safe, and they came up out of the whatever item it is they're attached to, showing that they're utilizing these items as a shell, and it is the capacitor. Like, that's where they have to stay put, which is why you have things that kind of move with a haunted item, or you have an area where like this is haunted but everything around it is not, because they have they can't go that too far away from their capacitor. So it's interesting to really dive deeper into like how this all works, and that whole, like how you were saying, negative energy that might dissipate or needs to continually bring stuff in.
See, and kind of connecting into that, just another weird thing to think about. So the negative energy that exists within a haunted object, it makes you wonder if that negative energy, whatever you want to call it, is created because of the thought that we're putting on that specific object. And it's not that maybe the initial object had something that jump-started it to have this like negative energy attached to it. But as it continues through the years, like what keeps it having that negative energy is the thought that it has negative energy. So we're projecting this constant negative energy onto this object. So in turn, we're keeping it haunted with our own thoughts of it being haunted. But as an extension to that, we're talking about this whole like cloud concept. I don't know how far they went in with the UV lights on this stuff, but I kind of wonder if it's not necessarily that it's inside of the object, but rather that it has to be almost like a ball and chain, like attached to the object at some close point that like, so when you put it inside of like a box, for example, like the reason why it doesn't interact anymore is because you cut off the cloud from its source. It's not that you're keeping the thing contained inside. It's just that you cut off this cloud from the source. So in turn, by that logic, it makes you wonder if you kept something in one of these anti-haunts, whatever you want to call them, boxes for long enough, if it would essentially like get rid of the haunting in it, because that cloud would eventually have been disconnected for so long that it would either dissipate or it would have to find another energy source because it can't connect to that source anymore. And then if it becomes rehaunted again, it's not that it's the same energy source. It's rather that you pulled it out and you put your thought on it again, and now something else that's nearby is like, boom, here you go, energy source, let's go.
Yeah, and it could very well be. And this is why, like, some people get attachments. Like some people get an attachment when they go investigate. And I talked a little bit about this with Barry, and his overall opinion of it was that there's an interaction between ultraviolet light and the iron content in your body. So
not to mention your water, so you're conductive too.
Yeah, so he was like, the higher the iron content in your body, he's like, the more, protected he felt you were. And he said that the lower the iron content in your body, the more people seem to get messed with. So somebody who's anemic was more of a target than somebody who had a full iron content. And I almost wonder if this is because, maybe with a lower iron content, we're less conductive of our own energy field, leaving more space for something to invade. So it's an interesting concept. People leave with attachments, and then it takes forever to get rid of them. And people spend weeks, months, years trying to cleanse these things off of them.
See, I think that there also could be a component that comes into this whole idea of like auras. And just to explain this from another standpoint so that it doesn't sound super crazy out there woo-woo, my whole idea and theory when it comes to like auras that people talk about in the spiritual aspect of things isn't as spiritual as we think it is. It's kind of like the concept that like bees, when they're going after flowers, they give off this ultraviolet light and they give off almost like this mist around them that gives off signs to other things. It's not that they're like anything spiritual or doing anything, whatever. It's just that they have this secondary nature that they don't realize that they have. I think the same thing can be said for humans, that you know, we give off this like energy field, whether we're angry, whether we're happy, whatever, we give off these different energy fields around us because of the energy burst that's coming out from us, the same way that a flower would react. But the thing is, we can't see these other things. Maybe other people, they kind of have this ability where maybe there's an extra cone or something in their eye, or there's something that's, there's got to be some scientific explanation to it, why there's this pattern of people seeing auras and seeing the same colors on same people and stuff. But I don't think the colors are like anything more than like the energy that you're giving off or the frequency that you're giving off, depending on what, I guess, energy level you're kind of vibrating in, depending on your emotion. But that being said, having these like almost like an aura bubble around you, depending on like what your internal emotions are. If you go into these locations and you're just like a generally pissed off person that has this like dark aura, like things are going to be attracted to it the same way a bee would be attracted to a flower. It's the same concept. You know, if you're a positive energy person and you have this positive energy, then maybe you'll have the energetic, happier side of this stuff interact with you, where, you know, you'll have these people that'll, there's a whole debate for is people that are like mediums, for example. But I definitely think that there are some people out there that there's something weird to it. And maybe those people, they give off more of that positive energy aura, which is why they have these like interactions with these more positive type things. And then on the flip side of it, you go into a place again and you're just this pissed off, angry person, you know, it's attracting that energy to it. It's not that there's like it can read my mind, it can read my spiritual energy, anything like that. It's just literally a matter of like the same way that flowers give off ultraviolet rays saying that they want to be pollinated is the same thing that we give off, this ultraviolet rays that tells things to stay away from us or to come towards us, which also could explain the whole thing with animals, that they know with a person, like what's going on with them. They clearly have something to them that we can't perceive anymore. And I think that's what it is. Maybe it may not be as simple as like they can see the colors, but they can somehow just like sense these energy auras. And I think that it's just, if you connect it in with other scientific things, like it completely makes sense. But if you just come at it saying like people have auras, then it just sounds like this whole like woo-woo irrational thing. But if you relate it to flowers, like I feel like it would make sense that these negative energies would attach to people because they would basically just be giving off this mist saying like, come pollinate me, essentially. Right.
And it's the whole theory of like our energy field exuding over the bounds of our body. And I've talked to people that see auras. I've spoken to mediums. I've had people that have tried to read me. Like I've experienced a lot of these things, and the best way I can explain it is, and I think one of the best visuals you can get is Ghost Hunters Taps actually did an episode where they had a medium come read one of the team members, and they filmed it in thermal. And as they filmed it in thermal, they could see almost like the thermal energy around the medium kind of reach up, over, and kind of attach to the investigator. And then they were telling them things about family members and loved ones that passed and naming things they should know. And it starts to really like make you think like, okay, well, if someone can see auras, does that just mean they see farther into the EMF field? Are they able to see EMF radiation like an animal? Is that what they're actually seeing? And is the different color just an intensity? Because heat is energy, energy is heat. So obviously the hotter something is, there's a color scheme to it. You know, the hottest you get is white, and then it kind of goes back down from that: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, black. So it almost gives you like that, you know, how high of an energy field are they radiating? Is it an intense EMF field? Is it a low EMF field? You know, it's almost like the K2 meter. You know, you get the lights from the lowest field to the highest field, and they're different colors. And I think it's got something to do with that, because it all kind of links together, and dogs see in blue, green, and yellow. So they're actually colorblind compared to us. And the people I've met that see auras are partially colorblind or hue blind.
It's a really funny, really weird, funny extra thing. So I don't see certain colors that great. Like I mix up like browns and greens and certain things like that. And again, this is like a whole topic up for debate on the spiritual versus like scientific side of this. But when I was doing psychedelics for a while, like specifically like mushrooms, I used to have this thing where I would be able to like, it was really, really hard to explain. It wasn't like this like full bubble or aura around people, but it's almost like an outline that would like radiate like color, that once I got to a certain point of like being on mushrooms, and everybody knows that you feel this like weird vibration and frequency, like raising effect when you take these things. And I think that they interact with the brain in a little bit more of a scientific way than when people connect with like the spiritual realm of things. But again, I'm a person that has issues with certain colors. And when I used to take psychedelics and reach a certain level, I could see these like energy auras around people. So that's weird that you brought that up, because I never knew that those two went coincide together. I just thought I was fucking crazy for a while talking about this concept until I started diving into it and found like, again, a scientific explanation for it. I'm like, all right, maybe this makes some sense.
Even funnier is everybody I've ever talked to, that's exactly how they describe it. It's not this bubble. It's not this like big flowy like energy behind them or fire, or it's an outline. It's a close outline, and some people it's a thicker outline, and some people it's a very thin outline, and it all depends on how you hold your energy.
Sometimes you can see it better with your eyes closed, as weird as that is. Like you have somebody in front of you and you like close your eyes, and it's weird. You can like, rather than just getting the outline, it's almost like you have a silhouette of the person that's almost like in that color. Like it's something that is existing like past your eye spectrum. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like there's something that's still residual left in like the back of our eyes. That's maybe something that's slowly starting to like fade out, or something that's maybe just starting to develop. But yeah, that's the other weird component. You close your eyes, you can almost see these energy fields better. So like that's a weird thing to explain. It's got to be some other receptor in the brain at that point, which would explain it for animals then too.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show.
And that almost hinders over to the ping pong ball theory. The whole like blindfold them. They listen to white or pink noise, and they would cover their eyes with ping pong balls and red lights, and have them do kind of like, okay, you're gonna go into the next room, you're going to look around, and you're going to come back and describe it to me, without leaving this room. And it was the astral projection remote viewing project.
It's less stimulation. That's what it is. Because when you have less stimulation, I think you can focus on these like energy fields. Because I think we naturally can pick these things up. But the problem is that we're so used to interacting with our physical reality that like it's almost one of those things. If you don't use it, you like forget how to use it, So it's almost like you have to put garters on to make it so that you can just singly focus on that one particular thing.
The overstimulation.
Exactly. Yep. Over visual stimulation. You close everything off, and then you can just see those energy forms, which again, I think it's something that connects into the brain past the eyes. Like there's got to be a second receptor past the eyes in the brain that picks these things up.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many things, this can, like I said, everything has an explanation. We just don't look hard enough for it. People stop at the woo-woo. They stop at the, that conversation point, because all these people are like, oh, I want to be a ghost hunter. I want to go hunt ghosts and run around and, and then something touches them and they're like, oh my God, it's a demon. Or like this, they jump to the conclusions, they stop looking, and it just becomes this like, I don't know, placeholder for people. It's an expensive but less expensive hobby than jumping out of airplanes or mountain climbing or whatever it is that it's like a cheap thrill.
Yeah, people just want to
comparatively.
get scared. They don't want to do the research. They're more interested in the quick thrills of it.
Yeah, and that's what's brought the paranormal to what it is. And myself and a select few others were really trying to push it the other direction. And that's why, like, I found my friend Nick on TikTok, and we started really talking and working on a lot of things. And he came up with a scoring system that you can use on an investigation. It's genius. I was like, this is awesome. You can actually start, because everywhere you go, it's, oh, you're in the most haunted jail in the world. Oh, you're in the most haunted courthouse in the world. It's like, how the hell do you know?
It's like the world's best cup of coffee that they have on every single little diner.
Exactly. So it's like, he gave a reason and a way for us to actually do that. So I'm like, this is awesome. So I'm like, I got to talk to this guy. And I ordered one of his books, and it's the Paranormal Investigators Workbook. And I was like, this is amazing. I love this. I need to know more. And then I ended up working with him even more. And I wrote an article in the Almanac, and he put that out. It's the Paranormal Investigators Almanac of 2025. And it has articles about, like everything I was just talking to you about. Like I do a whole base theory on that. And he has some other people in there, a medium who kind of explains coming into mediumship and how that works. And then he has all of the charts in the book to make it a real almanac of, the weather, moon phase, all of the details of an investigation, and then the score he got for each and every single one of those dates. So then an investigator can look at the book and think, okay, I know that I really want to go to Waverly Hills or, Eastern State Penitentiary or one of these really big locations that everybody's got on their bucket list. And they're like, but they only offer so many dates, so everybody takes whatever the hell the first date is they give them. And then they have the worst night ever, and they've spent all this money and time trying to get there. And it's a bummer. But having the book and having the almanac to kind of go through and say, okay, well, this is the best date. This is the best, time period I could try to go to maximize the actual potential of getting evidence. It's a game changer. And it makes it so we can actually start looking at this, scientifically and get better evidence, get more stuff to show people and say, okay, well, there's something actually here.
See, that's one of those things that the people that don't want to believe in it are never going to be convinced. It doesn't matter like what you put in front of them. It goes into, I bring this up all the time on the show, the whole like Yuri Bezmenov concept about brainwashing and psychological brainwashing, that if you instill this idea in people for so long, you can eventually get to the point where you can show them the truth and they still won't believe it. So I feel like we've gotten to a point with that with the paranormal, that the people that want to believe in it are going to believe in it, and the people that don't just aren't. It doesn't matter what evidence you have. That same piece of evidence is going to convince these people that it's real, and it's going to convince these people that it's complete bullshit. So it's like, it's going to be one of those things that maybe in the future we'll have good enough equipment that we can completely like track this as like a solid phenomenon. But it's like right now, I feel like we're just starting, like we went from the whole like spiritual aspect in like the 1800s to just now starting to get into like the more like scientific understanding of this stuff. So like we're just at like the cusp of this starting. So it's like with our equipment now, I think it's the start to being able to show some substance to this, but I don't think we're going to be able to do it with any of our current equipment until it advances to a point where we almost have something where you can like almost like image something standing in front of us. And I've talked about this concept and like how we could potentially do that. And I've talked about this concept on if somebody could basically like, you take like thermo, but you like reverse it, where it'll pick up cold and show that as the specified area versus like how a heat thermo, it would basically be the reverse of like a heat. And maybe you could just show these like cold spots that might be like in the shape of like a humanoid object, but it's like we haven't gotten to the point yet where we have the instruments to line up with like the thought that we're starting to get to with this stuff. But the thought comes first, and then the next thing is you start developing the equipment to prove those thoughts. So again, we're at the cusp, we're just at the start of hopefully being able to prove this thing into like literal existence. Not that the government probably hasn't already been doing that since the 40s, but that's their research.
Right. It's funny. I actually have thermal cam video of a cold spot that looked like someone crouched behind a curtain. And I was investigating it was a puppet place, I can't think of the marionette theater. It was a marionette theater. So it was like somebody crouched off the side, with the curtain, like they would be manipulating a marionette. And it was there for a good minute, and then it disappeared and it was gone. And it was completely cold, but human shaped. So it's interesting you bring that up. But I've been talking about the same generalized theory, but being able to visualize EMF radiation, not yet something that can be done. Thermal is the closest we get to seeing EMF. But there's another team of investigators, and they're not on like a big TV show thing. Like they went off to another show that's on a network that comes from another country, so they could do the things they loved the right way. And they use a camera called an EMCCD. It's an electron multiplying camera, and it is crazy expensive. So I can't afford it ever. Unless somebody wants to make me famous out there or give me money. But it's, he caught some really cool evidence with it. And I think he's on the right track of being able to visually capture something by showing it on an energy particle or energy level, because it starts looking at like the actual electrons. And it starts looking at like moving at high speeds, because EM fields, like it moves at high speed. It's not a slow moving, bubble. It's not this particle of dust you see flying around in slow motion doing little twirlies, like everybody shows on their evidence videos. And like I've been dying to try to figure out. And I think I figured out how, but figured out the fact that I can't. There's no way in hell. It's not science yet. It's not something I can do. I'm not smart enough for it quite yet. Like basically making the ghost trap, the Ghostbusters ghost trap. Because I'm like, if you could basically pull in vacuum EMF and conceal it with Faraday cage material, which is perfectly possible, then you can capture ghost. And then you put it in a charged Faraday cage, you pump it full of EMF, and then maybe you can make it manifest so you can sit there and talk to a ghost. The only problem is there's no vacuum for an EMF radiation. This would be basically UFO technology, as they would talk about, reverse tractor beams, which nobody has figured out how to do yet.
Dude, talk about some weird predictive programming, though, man. Like, we've talked about this stuff all the time in the community, that they lay these little clues down for how things work in like these movies, hoping that maybe one day somebody will basically say, oh, that reminds me of this concept from a movie, and then people will completely look at it as fiction. But diving into the people specifically in that movie, you got Dan Aykroyd, who had a UFO experience, and he had that whole show he was going to do, and then the government came in and shut it down, so he's got some weird ties. And then you also got Bill Murray, who, I mean, he's knows fucking everybody, and he's also connected in with like Hunter S. Thompson, who was connected in with a whole other weird spectrum of like conspiracy theories and government connections and everything like that. Like, maybe it was one of those things that was, it makes complete sense, and that's why they put it in this Ghostbusters movies, because they know that at one point somebody will get to a point where they're like, all right, this is how this would work. And then somebody else will go, that sounds like this fictional thing. Like, maybe it's something they already created, and that's why they put it in the movies, because it's something that already exists, and they want to make it look like it's this fictional aspect of things. But, like, again, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more conspiracy with the paranormal community than I think people actually realize or give it credit for, which makes it the ultimate conspiracy, is because people completely look over how in-depth the conspiracies are into this paranormal realm. But like, again, everybody's looking at UFOs, all this stuff, but the government has spent so much. I mean, they've spent a lot of money on UFO stuff, but I feel like over the course of the years, they've probably spent significantly more money on this whole astral projection, thought projection, all this whole idea, this other consciousness afterlife realm that there's got to be way more of an understanding and conspiracy around that than anybody ever realizes. And that's why they just are like, oh yeah, ghosts, demons. Yeah. Do your thing, man. Like, wow, have fun.
Right.
I mean,
true.
Even the 3 scratch thing, I was going to bring this up earlier. I mean, I don't know if you dive into all like the weird Nokia Tesla stuff and all like the whole him diving into the ether, like it weirdly kind of connects into like everything we're kind of talking about. You know, maybe the 3 scratch plays an effect into the whole component that he was saying with, if only people knew the secret to 3, 6, and 9, you know, maybe the whole aspect of the 3, 6, and 9 thing is this whole concept about how this astral plane works. And rather than it being like, oh, the Holy Trinity, they're trying to scratch you, it's actually something or someone, whatever you want to call it, this other thing on the other side that's trying to say, this is the 3. You're physical, this is the 3. The 6 is this area existing outside of it. And if you learn to break past the 6, then you get into the 9, which is when you can exist in this astral plane area. And maybe the like 3, 6, and 9 is a matter of like where your energy forms or energy auras reside, is that within your physical body, there's the first 3, and then just outside of your body is the next 3. But when you break out of those other into the next 3 past that is when you can leave your physical body. Like, and again, there's a lot of government conspiracies with Nokia Tesla, that as soon as he passed away, the U.S. government came in, took all of his journals, took all of his notebooks and everything. And he was always talking about this 3, 6, and 9 thing. Again, maybe there's a weird connection here with this whole how the astral realm works, and that's actually the secret. And the 3 is literally these things on the other side, or even Nokia Tesla himself, or whatever was giving these ideas to Nokia Tesla, because he always said he felt like he pulled it in from the ether. That's trying to say, like, this is the 3. It's not 3 Holy Trinity. Like, this is the 3. Physical is the 3. Understand, so that you can get into the 6. Then the next step is the 9.
Yeah, and there's so much. And I mean, I've always felt like, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not like one of those people that's got the red string, you know, and I'm just like, but I feel like the farther I dive in, the farther I look into these things, like it all really does make sense.
It's pattern recognition. It's never conspiracy theory. I always tell people, like, you want to call people conspiracy theorists, it's just pattern recognition.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of this stuff makes sense. I mean, yeah, I'm not, you know, like I said, I'm not the guy with the red strings, you know, like it's all connected, you know, but it's like there's connections to a lot of this stuff. Am I saying it's all real? You know, no, obviously not. Like, it's not, you know, that half of the world is lizard people or anything else. It's, there's real actual connections in some of the stuff we really think about, talk about, and then we show those connections. And it's like, it's not a reach. Sometimes we go a little overboard in our theories because, you know, you always dive deeper into your own work. And that's why we have colleagues, so we can talk back and forth and somebody can say, oh, you know what? That doesn't sound right. That doesn't match up to me. I need more explanation. Like, that's the whole concept of working alongside other people so that you can make sure to stay on that right path. But there is so much connection with all of these theories, some of the conspiracy theories that fall into it. And it, you know, it's only called a conspiracy theory because people refuse to believe it.
I mean, the whole term conspiracy theorist was intended to be derogatory towards anybody that was like diving into like the JFK assassination and everything. So like the whole intention of that word was intended to be derogatory and make people look like they're that weird group of people over there. But again, it's just a matter of the people that are in power don't like people that see pattern recognition. And it doesn't matter what the conspiracy is. Like, usually it's a matter of recognizing patterns, like whether you're diving into the whole thing that happened a couple of years ago, and then you start diving into history and you start seeing these repeating cycles, or even just like cover-ups on things that you'll see that they'll like focus in on this point, and then they'll focus in on this point. It's like, you'll just see these patterns that are just reoccurring throughout different phenomenon, or even just like the laying down these little clues in old movies. And then 20 years later, you look back and you're like, wow, that logically makes sense. And you see this in the UFO community, in the cryptid community, in the paranormal community. It's like, it's just pattern recognition. It's not being a crazy conspiracy theorist. It's just, once you see something repeat so many times. It's like, it's kind of hard to avoid if you're a person that is observant of things.
Yeah, and it's so true, man. There's more to the world, and there's more to our existence. And I wish I had the time to really dive into it all. Like, I really wish I had more time to really look at all of these things, all of these aspects, and really start to understand it. And, some of these people I talk to, who I feel they've gotten to a point in their life where they have that ability, they have that time and freedom, and now they're starting to sit there and they're like, I'm getting old. I need to pass on the baton. I need to find the next generation that's willing to pick up the mantle, and it gets harder and harder and harder. So it's crazy to think, that there's so much more we need to learn about our surroundings and about the world. But I encourage people, and I hope more of them really start doing it, like start looking into this, question things, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what life is about, is questioning things and enjoying the journey.
Ain't that the truth? And dude, I'm happy to see that no matter what the phenomenon is, whether it's ufology, cryptid stuff, even like paranormal stuff, no matter, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was a lot less people that had like scientific backgrounds diving into this stuff. It was a lot more just like normal people like researching this stuff. But I'm really, really happy to see that, again, from the perspective of like a podcast host, there's a lot more people that have very, very in-depth backgrounds in different aspects of research, actually diving into these phenomenons now and actually trying to prove it in the scholarly form now. Like, it's awesome that we're actually getting to the point now where it's, again, just at that cusp where it's about to actually start becoming like a science that's actually classified as a science, now that there's enough people that have backgrounds that are interested in this stuff. Like, never in a million years, dude, that I think that there would be people that dive into psychology that are diving into the paranormal, not from the aspect to disprove it, but from the aspect to prove it and what our psychology plays into it. Or even people that are archaeologists or whatever, actually diving into like the whole concept of Sasquatch. Like, it's awesome, like to actually have not just everybody throwing shit at a wall now, but people that are actually able to do these experiments to actually prove this shit that we've been flinging at walls for the past 20 years,
Yeah.
Stay tuned, guys. This is our last break. But if you enjoyed the show and you think I deserve it, then please leave a review or rating for this show on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcatcher you happen to use. Your continued support is what makes the show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. Now feel free to skip past these ads so we can get back to the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it. I guess with that, man, I always like to end the show with some words of wisdom. So if there was any words of wisdom that you might want to bestow on the listeners today, man, what might it be?
Let's see, words of wisdom. I'd have to say my words of wisdom are to keep an open mind, but not forget to question, because seeing and accepting things as they are only go so far. So to question the things around us and have a healthy respect for that question is, I think, what's the best way to investigate anything in the paranormal field or in life.
Be an open-minded skeptic. That's what I'm always saying on the show. Like, be open-minded to the possibility of something strange, but be a skeptic enough to rule out anything that has a real-world explanation. Because if you have somebody that's always a skeptic, they're going to completely prove anything wrong, even if you have anything. And if you have somebody that wants to believe no matter what, then every bump in the night is going to be something. But if you find that good middle ground, like most things, it's always about the middle ground where you can say, all right, here's a weird sound I heard. All right, let's investigate. There's a door over here. This couldn't have shut. This couldn't have shut. All right. There's no other explanation as to what this could be. Maybe we have something here. Like that's ideally where you always want to be, is in that middle ground, that an open-minded skeptic. Be open to the idea of possibilities, but be skeptical enough to rule out anything that's real world.
True. I mean, my journey in the paranormal started with learning to be the skeptical, but still believe. Learning how a house goes together, how 1950s electrical is wrapped in paper, and therefore you have EMF leakage. and learning about copper pipes and how they bang through walls and houses, and knowing the more you know gives you the power to show what is actually there, and that's what it's about.
Ain't that the truth, man? Learn everything, because you never know where it actually might end up falling into play with like what you're actually researching. Like, I'm always telling my daughter this, man, that, if you want to dive into cryptids, you want to dive into this, you have to have an understanding of not just that, but other stuff. Like, if you want to dive into cryptids, you have to understand biology. If you want to dive into the paranormal, you might want to know some general aspects on how electricity and basic things like that work in a house to be able to rule stuff out. Like, you never know where the cross might be. So, spend every day learning, because you never know when it might end up coming back up and being useful for your research. Even if it seems unrelated now. But if anybody wanted to come and check out your awesome podcast, any of the research you do, or even possibly get in contact with you, man, how can people find you on the internet, and where can people find your shows?
So they can find me at AemonParanormalResearch.com. I have pretty much everything's underneath that. Tales from a Ghost Hunter is the podcast name. I co-host Stories from the Cemetery, the podcast. I have a book of just kind of like stories of things that I've actually experienced in the paranormal called Tales from a Ghost Hunter. And they can find me in all of the Paranormal Investigators Almanac, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, all social media I'm practically on. That's pretty much everything. I mean, it's so much to upkeep on the other side of things. It's hard to remember all of the ones I have to name.
Dude, you and me both. I run 3 shows all together, one a YouTube show and 2 main podcasts, so I completely understand that, man. And on the flip side, man, this has been a really, really fun conversation, and I'm really glad that you brought up your paranormal experiences at the end, because I completely forgot to come back around to that. So maybe that's something we can set up a round 2 for, and we can dive into some of your paranormal experiences, because you got me going on theories, man, and I completely lose track once you get me going on theories.
No, I'd love to, man. This has been a great experience. I loved the conversation. So you really got me jogging. I'm sitting here typing notes and, and coming up with more stuff I got to look into. So,
hey, man, that's always the best shows, man, is when both people walk away feeling like they learned something new, because that's, gives everybody something to go home and research. Nobody wants to keep doing the same repetitive stuff. Like, this is how the research expands, is through having conversations like these, man.
Exactly.
If you guys enjoyed today's conversation and want to show some love, smash that follow icon and share today's episode with a friend. Grassroots support from listeners like you is exactly how the show grows. So again, thank you. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can get a hold of me through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the ones that I'm the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the Open Minds Media hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And you guys can text or call that, whatever is easier for you guys. And also don't hesitate to call because you think I'm going to answer on the first ring, because that's definitely not going to happen either. It'll more than likely be that you guys leave a voicemail, and then I'll end up contacting you guys later on. And on another side note, if you guys have some free time, don't forget to go and check out the awesome friends of the show, I Know Squatch, Snarly on Natural Products, Cryptotheology, and Big Ape Threads, and our friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with additional discounts and credits available. More information on those, of course, is available down in that show description. And everything that I just mentioned, and mentioned throughout the show, is all available in the link tree, which of course is also available down in that show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show's connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey. With a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our